I always wanted to go to, intended and expected to go to university because I was a good student. McGill was always close to the top, or sometimes the top of my list, but I was kind of unsure of which university I would like to go to. It ended up that I did not choose McGill. McGill chose me. And I sound as though I'm bragging, but it's a fact. I got a letter from McGill. I had never applied because one didn't apply until after the high school marks were in. I got a letter from McGill saying nothing about you're admitted to the university, but you now have a 4-year university scholarship, which will pay your tuition fees and very generous living expenses. And the only condition is that you keep up your first class standing throughout. I said, so that's the way I went to McGill. During wartime, and because it was wartime, the brilliant West Indian students who would have gone to Oxford and Cambridge came to McGill because it was safe. And I found myself for the first time in my narrow life that I just mentioned, meeting unusually intelligent, wonderful people because they had fantastic scholarships, who didn't look like me in color, didn't sound like me in the West Indian accent they had, and they just enriched my life at McGill. I don't think I was an unusual woman for my time. In fact, I had 3 graduate scholarships. I think it was very close, maybe a couple of weeks before I was to go to the University of Chicago. I was a sociologist. University of Chicago was the mecca for sociologists. I met my future husband. Like many women, I'm sure, of my time, I dropped the scholarships, got married, and I was satisfied that I had done the right thing, and I'd certainly done the right thing by whom I married. But I gave up my career, I thought, forever. Yes, I remember it very well. It was a late afternoon. My husband was away on an inquiry commission that was going to keep him away for a month. My son was playing hockey, extracurricular activities because it was late afternoon. My daughter was in ballet class. I was alone. When they came home, I made supper for the 3 of us. The next morning, I phoned McGill to put me in touch with someone to whom I could talk about getting back for graduate studies. I made an appointment with the chairman because had I not had that pause in my career, I would have automatically gone into graduate work. Having been out for so long, I needed permission of the chairman of the department. This was my first experience with the Times. I showed him in paper, because I got it all photocopied, my academic record. I had A+ in every course I had taken. He didn't comment on that. He said, "What does your husband do?" My husband had an absolutely brilliant career. I told him. He said, "I'll let you register. You won't be a threat to your husband." So he saved my marriage because if my husband was a street sweeper or something, he'd have been upset by my career. Abbé Gérard Dion was chairman of the School of Industrial Relations at Laval University. He had founded the school. He learned something about my work and he liked it. He knew that I was fluent in French. So he said to himself, hey, she would be a good keynote speaker at the conference I'm organizing. A little time, I gather, must have gone by. He phoned my husband to ask my husband's permission to invite me to speak at his conference. He was reflecting the spirit of the times. I didn't complain about this. I was glad to go. It gave me a start. I remember my husband said I would have to work so hard because it would be in French. And I said, this is the first invitation I've had to speak at an academic conference. I don't care if it's hard. But then, when the conference came, something else happened that I thought felt was an insult to my dignity. I was sitting on the platform, waiting to be called to give my little talk. Abbé Dion was facing me because he was sitting in the front row of the auditorium. He stood up and walked out. I couldn't believe it. 2 or 3 minutes later, the door to the auditorium opened again, and in walked Abbé Dion, arm in arm with my husband, whom he had invited to come to Laval to hear me speak. I felt like the little 3-year-old whose daddy came to her ballet recital. I just felt it as I wasn't taken as a person myself, and I felt insulted by it. So I, as the French would say, j'ai pris mon courage entre les deux mains, and I patterned myself on an example that Abbé Dion had set when he spoke first thing that morning. He was a priest, and he had become an academic, and he liked being an academic, and he'd like to feel that he had intellectual freedom on his own. So he came in and he said, should I use the French to interject it a bit? He came in and said, je suis Gérard Dion. C'est Gérard Dion qui vous parle. C'est pas l'archevêque à Québec. C'est pas le cardinal à Montréal. C'est pas le pape en Rome. C'est moi-même, c'est Abbé Gérard Dion. And so, j'ai pris le courage entre les deux mains, and I said, and so, I want you to know, this is Shirley Goldberg talking. This is not my husband talking, même qu'il soit plus renommé que moi. My husband is more famous than I am, but it's me talking. And my husband applauded, and Abbé Dion applauded, and the audience applauded. I was invited to come as a member of the audience by good friends I had made at Laval when I gave that talk a couple of years before. One of my friends, colleagues, said, we're putting you on the platform. And I objected to that. I have nothing to say. Why should I be on the platform? Put me in the front row of the audience and I'll have my back to the audience and that'll be it. He said, I'll introduce you and I'll say you're here to bring greetings from McGill. If he had said greetings from Harvard, I'd have got applause. The silence was deafening. They didn't boo me, but I could feel the antagonism, the antipathy. And so I said, after the readings from McGill from a personal point of view. De point de vue personnel, ça me fait un immense plaisir d'assister à ce congrès parce que je me sens toujours la bienvenue à Laval. I was so pleased to be at this conference because I always feel welcome at Laval. Having said that, I got a thunderous standing applause. I thought the ceiling was going to drop in. So if you can pull yourself together to face something difficult, sometimes it works. There are a few questions there. The first one was sociology, learning about people and groups, learning about power relationships. I took a course in industrial relations, the first that was given, I think. I was at the bottom of the heap, and I had a professor who became my mentor, H.D. Woods. And he was at one time Dean of Arts at McGill, another time chairman of the Prime Minister's Task Force on Labor Relations. So he got very busy, and he found that he took me on as a teaching assistant and eventually passed his course on to me. So he told me that my studies in sociology would help me understand what was going on in the labor management relationship. And I just became fascinated by it. So that's how I began. I owe him everything. He seemed to have committed himself to making me have a career. And therefore, he guided me into what he thought would help me get in to a group like himself, like Harry Arthurs, with others who were already established. He said, "You've been out for so long. If you hash and rehash what we're hashing and rehashing what we have done, nobody will notice you. You've got to do something different and do it well." He said there are new groups, new people bargaining collectively, people unionizing who never unionized before. You direct your research in that direction, and people will recognize you. That's what I owe him. I think my husband created it because it became big, rather inadvertently to start with, but then very insistently. One day, a young professor, John Prispo, professor of industrial relations at University of Toronto, came to see Carl in Montreal. He had once done a research job for Carl and had a great admiration for him, and when he was stuck with anything, he would come to Carl for advice. This is what he was stuck with. He and a judge, a Quebec judge by the name of René Lippé, whom I didn't know, had been commissioned by the Institute of Public Administration of Canada to put together a conference to be held within 6 months on government employees negotiating with the government, their employer. He said they had information on the federal sector, they had information on the municipal sector, nothing on the provinces. Who do you suggest could help us? As my husband told me the next night, he said, "My wife." I said, "How could you do that to me? I know nothing about it." And he said, he had stopped me from having a career at a certain stage, but at a later stage, he hoped I would do it and do it well to satisfy myself. That led to something very important career-wise for me. Jacob Finkelman was in the audience when I was speaking about my research on collective bargaining and public employees. He was professor of labor relations at the University of Toronto. When the federal government decided to give their employees collective bargaining rights, Finkelman was the one who drafted the legislation under which that would take place. And he implemented that legislation by being himself the first chairman of the Public Service Staff Relations Board. After he heard me speaking at the conference, he asked me whether I would be interested or whether I would please co-author a book with him on the federal experience. And that turned into 2 volumes that really were very important in my career. Bus Woods, as I said before, was the spokesman and the person representing industrial relations in Canada, which was still a very limited field. He came into my office one day. I said that he always wanted to promote me if he could. Came into my office one day very proudly, waving 2 letters. Those were the days when letters were written on paper. The first letter was from a professor at Harvard, Peter Dorringer, who was editing a volume that was going to be called Industrial Relations in International Perspective. There was to be a chapter on the United States, on Canada, on all the countries of Western Europe, and on Japan. And in this letter, Professor Dorringer invited Professor Woods to write the Canadian chapter. Bus's response to the letter of invitation was that he was very interested, but very busy, and therefore could only accept the invitation if his colleague, me, Shirley Goldberg, would be invited as a full co-author. The reason for that is a lot of people, have their research people do everything and never mention. He said I would be the first full author. I remember the words he said to me, "You need this, I don't, so you will do the work, but you'll meet scholars from around the world, and this will give you an international reputation," and it did. One more thing that I owe to Bus. Well, the authorship shaped out that I wrote the chapter. I think it was well understood at the beginning, not that he wasn't capable, but that he didn't have the time. So it got him the authorship, but it got me a reputation that I never would have had before. We met, all the authors met, first at Harvard, then at LSE, and I felt I had died and gone to heaven. Then I wrote the chapter. Then I sent it to Galley, I guess it's called. And I headed it, the authorship, Woods and Goldberg. I got the galleys back, not a comma changed, except the authorship, Goldberg and Woods, because I had met the authors, and Woods had been kind enough to tell the other people, if you have any questions about our chapter, to go to meet with them. So it came back as Woods and Goldberg. I sent the galleys back. I didn't change anything else. I made it Woods and Goldberg. It came back as Goldberg and Woods, I'm sorry. That was the only change that the galleys made. No, here's Bus Woods again. When I started at the very bottom, teaching industrial relations. Industrial relations had not been taught as an academic discipline in Canada. Bus had done his own studying in economics. He may have been at LSE, I'm not sure, I don't remember. But when we started teaching, he was first employed in the Department of Economics at McGill, then started teaching industrial relations there. Then Francis Bairstow and I tagged along. We weren't happy in the Department of Economics, and they were very unhappy having us there. They said we didn't fit, we didn't belong. We were industrial relations people. Something very fortunate happened, and it was Bus Woods again. McGill established the Faculty of Management. Bus Woods was invited to join. He said he would join on condition that his two women colleagues, he didn't put it that way, he gave the names, Francis Bairstow and myself were invited. And that's where we really started teaching industrial relations as a major program. I never went after it. I never thought of it. There was an election, and someone submitted my name. I don't know who, I don't know why. I may have established some reputation for myself in the research work that I was publishing, in the new area of bargaining that I was looking into. But whatever it was, somebody put my name down. I never campaigned, and there was nobody else. It looked as though I was going to win by acclamation. All of a sudden, a friend of mine in a medium position in the federal public service put in his name, and there was nothing for me to do about it. I just sat and waited it out. I was elected with, I'm told, a very strong majority. First of all, I might say that I never realized the significance that people still talk about as having been the first woman president. I just did my best and I got elected. I realize now that it was a step forward, probably a major step forward, and I took it. So I didn't consider myself as a leader. The thing that I established first and that continued after me, that I was proud of, was that I arranged to have simultaneous translation in all our meetings. Thank you for saying a pioneer in the field, because I think I'm considered a pioneer woman. And I don't know which it is, or both perhaps, but I really did direct my research in a place that had never been before. And the place I got any recognition, if I did, was as a pioneer in a new area of collective bargaining. But I'm now called a pioneer woman, and that's fine too if they want it to be. I moved to Toronto. I wasn't in the city of Montreal where McGill was, so I really didn't follow very much what was going on with young people in my area. I have to say that I had very serious family illness, and I didn't really watch very much what was going on at McGill in my area or anywhere. Where I have become excited by the next generation is the scholarship that was established in my name by a wonderful inter-university research organization headed by my dear friend and much admired friend, Gregor Murray. They established a scholarship in my name. And the greatest thrill of my life these days is each year when I get a call told that someone had won. And I met these kids, and I wrote to them, and they wrote to me, and they told me what their research was and what their doctoral dissertations were going to be on. And that has been really a real joy and connection with the academic community now.